Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into the Well Sport Podcast. If this episode has a positive impact on you and you enjoy the show, please share with a friend. This not only ensures that the podcast continues to grow, but can also help share some of the positive message that we're trying to impart on the athletic community. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Well Sport Podcast. Today we are joined by a very special guest. She is a licensed psychologist, she was director of athlete and mental health and performance with Florida Atlantic University, and she is currently the mental health coordinator for the New York Mets, Dr. Tess Palmateer. Dr. Palmateer, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on today. I know you're busy, especially this time of year, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you. It's really cool to have someone on who is, your resume, just going through is very cool, especially to someone in this field. You're super experienced and you've worked with, the highest level of athletes. So I'm excited to learn from you today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So talking about your story a little bit, the floor is kind of yours. I'm always super interested being in this field, being a mental performance consultant, about hearing people's stories and how they got to where they are. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear a little bit to how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I played college volleyball back in Canada. That's where I'm originally from, and was struggling on the court, kind of my own worst critic and managing confidence. And so at that time, my dad was working for a professional hockey team as a scout, and they were using a psychologist to help with their draft selection process. So he was familiar with this provider and said, "You know what, Tess, I think you could benefit from meeting with her to help you on the court." At that time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was kind of living the dream. I knew I wanted to play college volleyball, and I'd figure out the rest later. But once I had my first meeting with this provider, I was like, wow, I think this is what I want to do. And so was able to fortunately get into some of the sports psychology classes, which, funny enough, I was a psychology major, but those classes were housed within kinesiology. So got the special permissions and started learning more. And so that was really great. I went on to get my master's in sports psychology. We did a ton of research. I learned so much, but I wasn't really working with the athletes. I wasn't out there doing the work. And so kind of asked everyone and anyone, what grad program should I be looking at? What are potential next steps? The one school that came up very consistently, and then I was fortunate enough to get an offer from, was the University of North Texas. So that program did a great job of combining both the clinical kind of mental health side of things, but also really does a great job of preparing us to work with athletes in these sports systems. But even when I rewind further, how did I get here? It's funny because my dad was a professional athlete as well. And so I used to always pick his brain, what were the highlights? What do you think you did well? What were, you most fearful of? What did you hate as an athlete? Just always picked his brain on that. Then when he was scouting, I used to go to the rink with him and ask, why do you like this player over that player? And it wasn't always skill-based. He's talking about, how does this player go into the corner? Are they approaching it fearfully? Are they being aggressive? What happens when they get on the bench? How are they interacting with teammates? So upon reflection, again, it was like, wow, I think I've always kind of been interested in the minds of athletes. So looking back, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I started college, but it all seemed to make sense in retrospect.
It's so cool. And I mean, of being interested in the mental side of things, what a cool experience having your dad to be able to pick his brain on these things. And what's really cool about what you mentioned is a lot of the things that he was focused on were the intangible things that most people don't look at. Right? How their mindset going into certain situations, and, are they good teammates? Things like that. When people are being drafted, that's being more and more talked about now, right? Because people are thinking long term, and it's just what a cool situation for you to be in, to kind of have that look into it that not a lot of people would have. I actually kind of want to go back. So you moved from Toronto to, was it North Texas?
Yes. Yep.
Tell me, obviously, you're kind of pursuing this dream at that point. What a big mindset shift. Like that's a huge leap of being like, hey, I'm moving from Canada to Texas, two very different places. So tell me a little bit about what that leap was like, because you're obviously super convicted in this work to be able to make that leap, and you wanted to do it at that point. So just tell me a little bit about that experience.
Sure. I mean, it was tough, and I had the mindset of I'm going to apply to these various schools. We'll see how it goes, but I'm not going to stress too much because, at UNT, they only accept 3 sports psych elective cluster students a year. So I'm
Wow.
sitting here and thinking, what are the odds? I'm probably not going
Yeah,
to get in, so let's not stress about what if I do.
sure.
Well, then I get the interview and it goes really well and I really like it. And then you get the offer and you have what feels like a very short window to decide. And at that moment, I was unsure of what I wanted to do because I'm like, gosh, am I really going to commit? The program is generally 6 years. Am I going to commit six
Mm,
years to this when that just feels like a really long time? And I was
yeah.
talking it through and I remember what my mom saying, in 6 years, you're going to be 30 anyway. Cause I'm like, gosh, am I going to be a student until I'm 30?
Wow.
And she said, in 6 years, you're going to be 30 regardless. One path, you have a PhD and you can live your dream. Or
Hmm.
the other, you're not going to have a PhD and who knows kind of what that path will look like. And so that was really helpful for me of, gosh, I mean, it sounds kind of cool. Maybe I'll be a doctor.
Yeah.
But I knew that this was the path that was going to help me get to where I wanted to be. So I had to have a little bit of a let's go for it mindset. And I think that also comes out in a lot of the work I do with the players of like, what would it be like to fully commit and just say, like,
Mm,
I'm all in, let's go for it. And I felt confident in that. My thinking was when I get to UNT, I'll have my cohort there with me. I'll have my peers. That's almost like my team because I'd always been on
sure.
a sports team. Like these are going to be my people. So I'll have some built-in support there. Feeling fortunate that I had great relationships as well. So knowing I'll be able to, call and FaceTime friends and family. But it was a big change and recognizing too 2016, thinking about the like just socio-political climate at the time, that was a big adjustment for me as well.
Hmm.
Moving to Texas, where there was a lot of opinions regarding politics and just social events. So I think
Sure.
that was challenging, but didn't really impact my decision going there. That was just once I got there, I was like, wow, this is different.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Such a culture change. But once again, I love talking to people about this because at some point in their journey in this field, 99% of the time, there's some sort of big leap, right? Just because it can be it's such a specific field, and especially even a couple years ago, there were less jobs in it, so you had to be you were taking a chance for sure. There are more and more opportunities available. Hopefully that continues in the right direction. But at some point, most people in this field had to take some sort of leap or are currently taking some sort of leap. So I'd love to hear your mindset and how you did that yourself.
Mhm.
And to your point, that's the same attitude that you take on with a lot of the athletes that you probably work with, right? Like you're setting yourself up to be a little bit vulnerable when you go all in. But what's the point if you're not, what's the point of doing all this if you're not willing to do just that and give yourself your best chance to succeed? So very, very cool. And then you mentioned you were a volleyball player.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that, like even when you were competing, because for me I always say a lot of the reason I'm in this field is because I'm being there for others in the way I needed. When I was wrestling, I was a wrestler, so I love to hear other people's perspective on maybe if that was the case for them, or maybe they were super always mentally strong and they just like sharing their perspective. So just your perspective as an athlete, and then how you use that today with the clients that you work with.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I was pretty critical of myself as an athlete of I was the one of after a game, they say, oh, great job. I say, yeah, but that one dig and that one pass, I
Yeah, but
should have
that's a
had that.
biggie.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was a big yeah butter.
Yeah, me too.
Always focused on what I could have done better and didn't always see what I did well. And so when we think about how's that going to impact my confidence, I didn't walk out there thinking like, I'm bad, like yeah, serve me. Let's see how this goes. So I didn't have
Mm,
that mindset. So I think that is one thing that I take with me because at the time I thought that mindset was really helpful. by
Hmm.
acknowledging, I could self-critique and figure out, oh, why did this happen? Oh, I didn't do this in the right way. I know how to fix it. I thought that that was so helpful, but didn't realize quite as much how much that was hurting me.
Hmm.
Other things I experienced, I had two hip surgeries in college. So
Mm.
those were, I mean, both were about 6 month recoveries. So the impact of going through a long-term injury, feeling the isolation, losing my identity, those are all things I think I'm able to connect with on players while still recognizing my experience does not mean it's going to be the same experience as my players. I experienced a coach change, and I
Oh man.
chose my university in part because I loved my coach. He was
Yeah.
awesome. I had him for 1 year, and then that summer I had hip surgery. My coach left, and my world kind of turned upside down. So that's another thing of the adjustments of new coaching staff, different norms. We had at times some challenging team dynamics, so I've been a part of that. Uh,
Hmm.
and then the ending of my career, like I didn't finish out my full eligibility. And so the foreclosure of that identity sooner than I had anticipated. So I feel like I kind of experienced a lot of the challenges that student athletes or athletes generally experience. So I think it's nice, as I mentioned again, like I've experienced a lot of emotions in sport, and I find it easy to connect with players while again still holding my experience. Even if we've gone through the same objective things, our
Yeah.
subjective experience is going to be very different. But I think all of those, then when I'm learning in school, I'm like, wow, like, yes, that would have been so nice to know, or I wish I had that resource. And
Yep.
it's funny, I actually had to go back and look of like, did my schools have college counseling centers? Like, did we even
Mm.
have resources to that? I was a psychology major in undergrad and I didn't know what resources were on campus.
Yep.
As you alluded to earlier, I think with a lot of jobs coming out in the field of mental health and mental performance for sports, there's a lot more conversations about it too. So I feel really grateful for that.
Absolutely. And it's so cool to hear, like, in those moments when we're going through those adverse times, it sounds like you're never thankful for it in the moment. You're never like, I'm happy I'm injured. I'm happy my coach that is half the reason I came here for left. Like, those are not great things in the moment. But what it sounds like for you is you did a really good job, and you could have never known this back then, really. But like, you've done a really good job of now it's giving you perspective, right?
Mhm.
Adversity can give us perspective. And especially in this field when we were athletes, it's just so interesting to hear how like now you're able to use tough times in your life to help others while recognizing their situation is unique and their
Mhm.
own, but still it gives you perspective into that. And also that gives you the trust with the athlete immediately of being like, hey, I've been through it too, right? We're all
Mhm.
on our own journey. We're going to have our own struggles through it, but that helps build that trust piece. With
Mhm.
me, I only wrestled 1 year at West Virginia, and I started as I was like a preferred walk on, and I was able to earn my starting spot through like some injuries and things like that. And I even after that, like I think a lot of people from the outside looking in probably thought that I was like living the dream, but I put a ton of pressure on myself. I was very burnt out, and I honestly, if I had someone there to talk to specifically about these things, I think it could have made all the difference for me and maybe continuing on. We had a great sports psych on staff, but like it was never pushed. No one that I know of really went to. It was still like taboo even back in 31 now, 2013-ish, right?
Mhm.
So nowadays it's more just part of the system, which I am so thankful for. You mentioned your kind of you have experience with the hockey perspective, volleyball perspective. Now you work for the Mets. What is it like kind of balancing? Because that's something I relate to. I work at a golf facility, but I work with athletes from all sports.
Mhm.
What is that experience like for you, kind of having that different background and working with athletes from all sports?
Yeah, I think it was nice because in my training, the first team that I worked with at University of North Texas was our track and field team. So that inherently is a very diverse group of individuals. There's multiple kind of subsystems within the team. Every event group has a different coach and runs things a little bit differently, but again, all under this larger umbrella of track and field and cross country. So I think that was a pretty cool learning opportunity for me as I worked with some of our pole vaulters, and I knew nothing about pole vaulting going into those conversations. And so
Sure.
the learning opportunity and part of our training of, hey, you need to do your due diligence and learn about this sport, but also the value of being embedded or sort of integrated in those systems is I get to go to practice. I get to be at team meetings. I get to learn the culture, learn the system, and use that to my advantage. And so
Hmm.
coming into baseball as well, I'd worked with some baseball players in college settings, but I would never have said I'm an expert by any means in baseball. And I still would definitely not call myself that at this point.
Sure.
But being here, it was a pretty steep learning curve. It felt like people were talking in a different language that I needed to learn. I didn't know the acronyms, I didn't know all the pitch types. And so
Yeah.
that looked like me, sitting with one of our associates watching like the metrics of the pitches and trying to guess what it was and talking about the value in the decision making and sitting in on meetings about defense. And, so it did take a lot of extra work to learn the culture and learn the system.
Hmm.
I'm also a believer of when I enter into a system, I need to learn and observe and find my place as opposed to kind of coming in and bulldozing and making space.
Could not agree with you more.
So, yeah, again, quite the learning curve. But what I think is really cool about our work is a lot of the same challenges that players or athletes face. They experience that in all sports. And a lot of the skills that we can use, we can tailor to fit where they are.
Yeah.
So, I came into this, again, not knowing nearly as much about baseball as I do about maybe hockey or golf or volleyball, but still felt very confident in my ability to meet the needs of our players.
I love what you said. I loved all of it, and I relate to a lot of it too. Being in working with a lot of golfers and working with a lot of people from other sports. One interesting kind of you have to learn the sport specific things. Absolutely, it's so important not just for building the trust, but for doing your job to the best of your ability, right, and helping them. But what I've experienced because we have a golf academy, and that's a big portion of my job is teaching the sports psychology practices to our golf academy. And at the end of the first year, I kind of asked. I'm like, what was it like having a wrestler, someone who really doesn't know much overly about golf, right? Like I'm learning the specifics. And they said that for the most part, and maybe they were just saying this to make me feel better because I asked, right? Who knows? But I'm taking it as it will. But what they said was like, they actually loved the fact that I wasn't a golfer. Because there was no way for me to judge them at all based on their golf swing, right? Because they knew I didn't know. I don't know the analytics of swing path and leaving your face open and all these things. So they know when they came to me, it was at the root of it, right? Based in these mental performance practices that are more broad, focused on breathing exercises, reframing your anxiety, all these things, right? Now, I've learned a ton of golf-specific things that I think are very, very helpful to your point. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I feel like having the base of not being a golfer, at least in my experience, has been really beneficial. Have you seen that at all, kind of on your end as well?
I think so. I think not being a coach or part of a coaching staff in some ways helps players understand that of course I want them to do well. I want them to reach their goals, but really that aligns with they see that I see them as a person, not just the baseball,
exactly,
player, not just a football player, but I really truly care about them.
Mm.
And so I can see the benefits, but again, while I'm sitting here, I'm like, I still think you do need your knowledge needs to get up there. And so as you're saying,
Yep.
You learn about golf, it does actually help your interventions. You can give more specific feedback. And then we can also lean on our coaching staff too. If we're doing some sort of intervention, how can we collaborate with them to be even more effective? Because it's so helpful to have that transdisciplinary approach.
So true. And with that for you, so you're a licensed psychologist and you have the performance piece as a part of that, right? So from your end, I don't know if I want to put like a percentage on it, but like what are how should I ask this? Because it would be hard to put like a percentage on it. But would you say it's just a complete integration of both things, the performance pieces and like the mental health and wellness pieces? Or like what part is your job the most of, if that was like the worst way to ever ask that question? But do you see what I'm saying?
I completely understand.
Okay.
Yes, like how much performance work in
There it
comparison to
is.
mental health am I doing?
Thank you.
Um, so I think our setup here is unique for me. So this is newer where we have our mental health department. We also have our mental performance department. So they're
Mhm.
two distinct entities. We work very closely together, but
Yeah.
we have mental performance coaches with most of our groups who do more that coaching skills integration. They're really working with our coaching staff, and so they're exclusively mental performance. Where
And that's Jimmy Van Ostrand, correct?
yes,
He's a
yeah,
part of the team. Yeah, he's a great guy. I've had some conversations with him. Yeah.
yeah. And so here it looks a little bit different, whereas in previous positions where I really have held both, because again, I'm more primarily mental health here. In former positions, a lot of the teamwork that I had done, the team sessions or workshops were more performance based. I'd say more, if I'm kind of thinking on the continuum of performance to mental health, I think it probably leans more on the mental health side of things.
Hmm.
Here again, more of the work I'm doing is about the person rather than on-field performance. But where I think I feel it gives me a benefit is that I have the mental performance side of things is um, a lot of the players, like what happens on the field impacts them off the field. And what's
Yeah.
impacting them off the field, carries on to the field. And so that's where I think it can be helpful and we collaborate of, hey, as we're, navigating this personal concern, have you thought about connecting with our mental performance coach where they can give you some skills on the field to maintain your focus, have composure, be able to execute at a high level? Because we kind of need to be doing both. So I
Hmm.
think again here it looks a little bit different because our departments are set up differently. Um, but I think previously I was kind of, weaving in and out of both
Yeah.
because the athlete identity and what they're doing, it's really important to these folks. And so it came up a lot in our work.
Absolutely. Do you have like a when thinking about this work, it's just so interesting because there is a blending of the two things, right? And it's like people are trying to like identify when you're kind of in which. I'm strictly on the performance side of things. Yes, there are wellness benefits from what I teach, but if a mental health concern would come up, I would refer. I kind of did that personally. I thought about going down the clinical route. I actually even took some classes,
Mhm.
but I just know my specific passion, which doesn't make getting the jobs are more specific, more of them are coming out, but if you do get that role, it can be, for me it was like very much what I wanted to do, right? So I'm lucky enough where I'm able to kind of do that performance specific with absolutely wellness benefits, right? But I would refer in that moment. For you being in this field, working with professional athletes who, I mean, because of their grit, because of their mental toughness, because of their determination, have been able to make it to the level of, the 1% of the 1% of the 1% who are able to play professional sports. A big part of that is because of those things I just mentioned.
Mhm.
But that being said, we know that there can also be some mental health struggles within those same things that made them great. Kind of like to your point earlier, it sounds like there was always that, but it was great, but that probably made you better in a lot of aspects. But to what extent did it make you better? And then to what extent did it maybe, hurt your wellness or even your performance in the long run? Trust me, these are questions I ask myself all the time, right? That we want to help people with now. Have you noticed the stigma start to kind of come back a little bit when it comes to might be some very hard-headed athletes, which is why they are so successful, right? So breaking down that stigma maybe with them of looking into their mental health and checking into that side of things.
Yeah, I think I've also seen differences in the populations where, like,
Mm,
in professional baseball thus far, I think there's a little bit more hesitancy to utilize our services.
okay.
This is their career. A lot of information is used. Uh, I don't want to say against them because that sounds bad, but if somebody experiences an injury, that does impact their value. And so
Sure.
folks are always considering, what's going to help me the most? Is there anything I could say or do that might be a detriment to my future career or potential contracts? So I think that there's just a little bit of slowness to trust here
Mm.
that I think I was struck by compared to the college setting where there's a lot more talking about mental health. There's a lot
Yeah.
more openness. Like I reflect back of walking into football lunches where, there's 50 guys there eating and someone will yell across the room like, "Hey Tess, are we meeting at 2 today or is it 3?" I'm
Yes.
like, "Okay, so you've just outed yourself that we're meeting in front of
Yeah.
all of your teammates and no one even blinked."
Mm.
And then someone else will say, "Wait, how do I make a meeting with you?" So I'm like, "Okay, now
Yep.
you've just opened the door for someone else." So there was a lot of openness. I couldn't keep up with the individual demand.
Yeah.
It was really tough. So that I think has been a shift here. Um, but I think kind of over time and why I feel really grateful with my setup is I am here full time. So a lot of my role is building relationships with players and staff so that we can get the trust, that there can be the openness. And also, I think when folks use the term mental health, they think, uh-oh, something's really wrong. Like, oh, well, I don't have
Hmm.
depression, so I don't have to come see you. Whereas trying to explain, we're trying to promote wellness. And I heard you say that too. Some of your work can promote wellness and like just talking a little bit about like, how are we navigating well-being? Again,
Mm.
maybe you're just having a stressful experience with a family dynamic. That doesn't mean that there's something really broken or like,
Sure.
but we can talk about it and work through it. And so I think some of it comes with the education and kind of expanding beyond this like mental illness approach or like that there's
Yeah.
something really wrong to how can we just be even better? So
Yeah. So true, just being like a part of the process. And I think in this work, it's becoming very much as this generation continues to like grow up and get older, mental health is just so much, it's just part of the system a little bit. I think we're going to continue to see openness to it of people being like, hey, it's almost starting, at least in my experience. I work with a lot of high school and collegiate athletes, and I am really starting to see exactly what you just said. People are like becoming proud to say, I work with a mental coach. Which a couple years ago is not necessarily the case. But it's even a good thing. Like I tell the athletes I work with, I'm like, when you're talking to college coaches, if they're being recruited, use me. Like
Mhm.
use my name. Say I'm working with a mental coach. They will talk to them about how like you feel strong about your mental game, but you want to build that foundation for when these moments come up, right? Like
Mhm.
integrating it into just being a part of the process, I think is something that's happening more and more. Maybe not as starting to hit the professional setting, right? But like those are coming up, like high school individuals like me, and then colleges are really pushing it almost to the point where I think burnout in this position is very common for college practitioners because there are so many athletes that are like, hey, let's do this.
Yeah.
But that I think is probably slowly kind of trickling up to the professional level where the stakes are the highest, which I think
Yeah.
only makes sense.
And it's been really cool too, just even thinking of I had some meetings with all of our, draft class this year, just the individual meetings. And there I'm saying, "Oh, hey, you went to this school. Oh my gosh, I know the sports psych there. Did you work with
Yes.
them at all?" And they would say, "Oh yeah, they would come talk to our team." And or maybe I didn't work with them individually, but I had some teammates that did. So even that exposure, I think, as you alluded to back in, the early 2010s, like maybe there wasn't as much involvement there, but now as those players are growing up with this and starting to enter into these systems,
Hmm.
definitely seeing an impact. So that's been really cool. And nice to know that my colleagues are doing great work and setting
Yeah.
me now up for success. So
Absolutely. It's so true. With baseball specific, it's such an interesting sport. I always say, like, people always say, you're a wrestler, that's the most mentally tough sport there is. And I'm like, maybe in a certain aspect, I totally agree. But also when you're actually out there competing, you're not thinking, you are just reacting, you're doing. In
Mhm.
sports like baseball and golf, I kind of put them on their own little kind of arena because you have nothing but time to think. I mean, in golf, you're playing the sport of golf for like a total of 5 minutes. The rest is just dwelling over your last shot or feeling the pressure of people watching you and managing that and managing your focus and, the ups and downs of you're going to hit a bad shot in 18 holes. How are you going to react? These type of things. Baseball is very similar. Also in the sense of you fail more than you win in baseball. It's a fact. Not talking wins and losses of a game, but the batting. I mean, an amazing batting average, like amazing in baseball is like, if you hit like 300, you are like top of the line, right? So how do you help these athletes manage the inevitable failure? Everyone's different. I know it's kind of a specific question, but it is a common thing in sports like baseball and golf. So I'm curious if you have any like high level ways to help them manage the acceptance of failure that is inevitable.
I feel grateful that our players recognize that of like, this is a game of failure. So that in and of itself is a great first step. What I think is really cool here is we talk some about, are we focusing on what's within our control or outside of our control? And unfortunately, as you're talking about batting average or ERA, that is a lot of external factors that are at play. So when I'm talking to players, I always talk about, is that one statistic really painting a vivid picture of your performance? How many strikeouts or walks you had or how many hits, and that just doesn't paint a vivid picture. So I try to help folks say, like, let's be a little more nuanced how we look at our performance, because it's not an inherently good day or bad day. And one metric doesn't exactly explain what you did out there. So for example, with pitchers, if you're talking about like, how well did you execute out there? I don't care. Like, did they get lucky and get a hit off you? You can also throw a not great pitch and they swing and you're like, oops, like, but I'll take it.
So true.
So try to help them understand and look at things a little bit more nuanced. Like how was your preparation today? When you gave up a run, how did you bounce back? Were you able to stay in the present moment? How were you, like, where were your arousal levels? Were you able to manage that to where you want to be?
Sure.
What were you like in between innings? What kind of teammate were you today? So again, like, it's not the simple scorecard, like even in golf, like I remember I was listening to your podcast the other day and you were mentioning it's a game where you have to literally write down your score after every hole, like reminder that didn't go well.
The outcome is just like in your and everyone else's faces on like every shot. It's crazy.
Yes. And so like, how are we responding to that? Are we giving ourselves a moment to take a breath and like disengage from this locked in focus all the time? Because golf is a long game. So is baseball. We cannot be locked in from the moment we wake up until post game. So those are some of the things that I kind of talk about with our guys.
It's there's so many good points there. It just goes to show how building some sort of a foundation and having a plan for these moments is all you can really do, right? Like I say, my work all the time is just about giving a plan for the moments that maybe stress you out or bring you anxiety. Even if you just have a plan for it, whether the thing I give you feel super confident in or not, hopefully that comes over time. But the fact that you have a plan for it will hopefully ease your anxiety about that exact same thing happening, right? Like, so if you're worried about, going 0 for 5 in a game, like that might happen, but at least let's work on a specific mental plan for you if it does, so you're more equipped to handle it, which will take the pressure off it in the first place. So like just hearing how there's so many different routes you could go, right? There's so many different things you can do. Our work is so individualized. But when you have some sort of mental foundation of planning for these moments, it can make like all the difference, especially at the highest levels when with you, like I said earlier, you're working with 1% of the 1% of the 1%. As someone said, I think it was, oh man, who was it? It might have been Francisco Rodriguez. It was an MLB mental performance coach that I had on here, and he said you could fill up basically, it doesn't fill up an entire baseball stadium of professional athletes or professional baseball players to ever play in Major League Baseball. And that just like blew my mind. It just kind of goes to show how 1% of the 1% these people are, right? What's different about them than a lot of the, people and clientele that I work with is their livelihood is kind of on the line. It is on the line, right? Like their performance is tied to their paycheck and providing for their family. That gives a unique pressure that the 99% of other athletes playing sports don't necessarily have to deal with. Once again, very individualized, but how do you help athletes deal with the fact that it is their job, right? It actually is affecting their life outside of this sport.
I think for me, it's important to recognize that outcomes matter. Like if I just were
I
to
love
say,
that you said that. Yeah.
yeah, if I'm sitting there saying, don't worry about the outcomes,
Yeah.
that's silly. Then it feels like I don't get it. I'm very aware that you need to perform at a high level to get promoted, to get the contract, to stay there. So I think even just validating like this is really important. And the more we focus on some of these outcomes, I know that that's the natural pull. Sometimes that actually hurts the outcome though. So while we can hold it's important, and that's going to be good data to assess are we on the right track,
Yep.
let's think about the process because that's within your control. If we're executing these things, ideally we're setting ourselves up for success or the best, at least the best likelihood that we will execute at a high level. But again, when people just say, don't worry about the outcome, it's like, okay, well, clearly you don't get it.
That's actually, I'm super passionate about that. Everything you just said. It's something I think I'm a little worried about in the field of mental performance. You kind of hear that a lot on like Instagram reels and things like that. Like outcome doesn't matter. And that is so, first of all, no one actually believes that. But then like, why are we putting all this time and effort into it? Even if you're not a professional athlete, like you want to win, you're working very hard. What would be the point if there wasn't like stakes on the line? And we can learn how to lose better in these type of things. But when we act like the outcome doesn't matter, I think it minimizes the hard work that these athletes are putting in. So let's accept it and kind of change our relationship to it. So I love that you said that. There's like this, it's changing your relationship with the outcome. It's not acting like it doesn't exist. Right? I think that's just kind of a big thing that, I don't know, I'm passionate about. I don't want to go too much the other direction where it's like, no, that doesn't matter, because it does.
Yeah. And again, I mentioned the term data. I feel like I own my identity as a nerd. So I often talk about like,
Love it.
we got to collect data, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the performance and the outcomes are part of the data that we're collecting.
Yeah.
So if we were to ignore it, I just don't think that that's helpful. But how can we look at that with more of an objective lens and treat it again as data? It doesn't mean anything about who you are as a player or a person in this. Like that's one moment of data, right? How can we kind of use that to paint again a vivid picture of what we're doing?
Yeah, when you have that growth mindset, even those losses, as corny as it sounds, if you're able to look at it more objectively in the long run, it can help you. It's just going to make you get better, right? So such a good point. I have two more questions for you. One, I'm going to kind of go back to when you got the job with the Mets. Just like that moment for you, I feel like that is a very cool moment that I want to shine a light on. I mean, it's one of those things where in this field, working and getting to the point where you're working with professional athletes is just such a cool moment. And it's something that, you know, a lot of us dream about. So like, what was that moment like for you when they're like, you're the person for this?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Celebrate that win.
Following or, you know, in grad school, I kind of had this mindset of, and I don't know where this came from, but I created this narrative of I'll probably work in college athletics for several years. I'll work my way up to be a director of a college system at one point. Then maybe I'll enter into the pro space. And my narrative was very different. It didn't follow that trajectory at all. I was actually very fortunate to step into a director role right off the bat. So I already didn't expect that at the college setting, but did that and I thought it went very well.
Yeah.
And then when the Mets had reached out to me about this position, and first off, I'm like, little old me, how did you find me, right?
That's an ego boost, right? That's cool.
But it was really cool. And the more I learned it, I thought, wow, I think I might be able to do this and do this pretty well. Like the way our system is set up here, I felt like it was really going to set me up for success while also acknowledging there's going to be a tremendous learning curve ahead of me, but felt very fortunate that, I mean, I don't need to know everything, and I certainly don't, but I think I'm pretty resourceful and I have a great support system in this field too. So when I met with those moments of, I don't know what to do in this situation, or I'm thinking this might be a a good route, but
Yeah.
let me call a few folks and get their opinions. So that I think was really helpful. But once I got this job, I mean, again, it just totally different than the narrative I had drawn up for myself, or I had told myself of what my career would look like. So
Yeah.
it was really exciting, and it's been awesome.
Mm. That's a huge win to celebrate.
Mhm.
It truly is. So I love hearing those aha moments, right? Of like, all right, we're here. It's not always easy. I mean, you moved from Canada to Texas to pursue this, and then it took you, now to Florida, and I don't know. It's just so it's inspirational. So I appreciate you sharing that as someone who is, this field is my life. So it's very inspirational and motivating to hear how you kind of got to where you are today. So we end the podcast with the same question. It's a very broad and general question, but all the answers for the most part have been pretty different, which has been cool. What is your favorite thing about sports?
I have been thinking about this, and I don't know. I feel like my answer is a bit of a catch-all, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna
sure.
roll
That's
with
okay.
it. But I
Roll with it.
think the community and the relationships. And
Mm,
so I know for me, most of my best friends I've met through sport. And
yeah,
so that's pretty cool. And we have a lot of players here even who talk about teammates and past teammates that then stood beside them on their wedding day. And that's
yeah.
really cool. But then also the relational component of being able to go through very, very, very challenging times with people, and having them there, but then also being able to celebrate like huge victories on and off the field. So for
Hmm.
me, I think it's just the relationships, the community, and the connection that are so special.
It's so true. There's really nothing like it. And I feel like going through those ups and downs with people, how could you not maintain that connection with them? It's a bond. Whether you love everyone or not, like on your team, you will always have that connection with them, right? Which is just so cool to hear. So thank you for sharing that. I love asking that question. As we wind down here, is there anything you want to get out there, or anywhere where people can follow you, or website or anything like that? Now's kind of your time to share.
Sure. I have my LinkedIn profile, which is just my first and last name.
Perfect.
I try to do my best to share opportunities, particularly for students or folks in the field, whether it's training opportunities or job opportunities. Then I also actually very recently just made an Instagram account, which is
Great.
Dr. _ Tess Palmateer, just the DR _ my full name, where I share a little bit about what I'm up to and what's going on here, as well as sharing content from other folks who do a really great job of
Mm.
doing the work. So those are probably two of the best places to find me.
Amazing. Everyone, please go follow her. It's also for those looking to get into this field, following people like Dr. Palmateer on LinkedIn is like it's really, really, really important for seeing job opportunities, internship opportunities, and just connecting. And just some quick words of advice just from my end, like also just don't necessarily ask right away. Just kind of introduce yourself and maybe offer some sort of life experience or just something to kind of stand out a little bit. Just from my perspective, that's been really impactful to me when people have reached out and been like, hey, I saw this video and thought of you, and it might be something you can use in your field. Just as some general advice, but connecting on LinkedIn is huge, and be sure to follow her on her Instagram as well. So thank you so much. I learned so much from you today. There's a lot I'm going to take with me. I'm excited to listen to this back and kind of stay connected with you, and continue following your story. The Mets are in good hands with you, so
Appreciate it.
yes, of course. Well, everyone, thank you so much again for taking the time to listen. I know you're all busy, so spending the hour with us really does mean a lot, and looking forward to talking soon.
All right. Thanks so much, Sean.